You know that I made videos about laptops, desktops, and monitors. Now let's talk about mobile phones. If you don't know which phone model to buy, or if you say, why does everyone buy an iPhone? Should I buy an iPhone too? You'll find answers to the question marks in your mind after watching this video. Let me give you a little spoiler that you will like. If you watched previous desktop computer and laptop videos, you may find it overwhelming, but this video will be much simpler. Because when buying a phone, I think you can easily understand everything because the options and considerations are much more limited. So, without wasting any more time, let's get started. First, let's start with performance. 1. Performance. Before explaining this part, I want to say something. I'm going to divide the video into parts. You can skip to any part below. Now, if you will use the phone for more gaming or heavy tasks, this part is very important for you. First of all, know this. There are certain factors that affect the performance of phones. The most important of them is the CPU and GPU. I could explain these two things in more detail, but I don't want you to get confused and make the video longer. That's why I will not go into detail and show you a method. Google this, Antutu benchmark list. Click the Antutu.com. You will see a list of phone models there. This list shows us the ranking of the best phones currently on the market. But I see numbers next to phone models. What does it mean? Now, these numbers you see indicate the scores that the phone got. For example, the first score shows us the score that the phone gets according to the CPU performance. This means the higher CPU score, the better the phone will perform in tasks. The second place indicates the score of the GPU, the third place indicates the RAM, and the fourth place indicates the score of the UX, that is, the user experience. So I understand the others, but what about user experience? How is it determined? The UX score shows how the phone will perform in everyday tasks. We can understand how satisfied a user in daily life will be by looking at this score. That's why if you are going to use the phone for daily tasks, this score is very important for you. Of course, if we look at the performance, the points in the left three places are much more important for us. If you want to have good performance and user experience, you can find the overall score on the far right. By looking at this score, you can compare phone models. In other words, when you will buy a phone, you should choose a phone model with the highest overall score as possible from this list according to your budget. In this way, you will choose the best phone you can buy according to your budget. I told you a lot of things so far, and I think you get it. I also want to say a small footnote. Make sure that the Android phone you buy for today's mobile gaming has at least 8 GB of RAM. Most new phone models now have at least 8 GB of RAM, but if you're going to buy an older phone model, it may be good to know this information. By the way, in the list I just showed, Android and iOS devices are listed separately above. If you are going to buy an Apple device, you can click the iOS button and go to that list. So can I compare the scores of Apple devices with the scores of Androids? Answer: absolutely not. But why? Because Apple and Android devices use different programming interfaces. So you cannot directly compare the scores of the two devices because the scoring mechanisms are different. If you are asking, is there a phone model you can recommend to me? In the description part below and in the comments, I will add the best phone models for every budget. Don't forget to look at those links. But there is some information you need to know before looking at those links. Let me explain. 2. Camera. There are many things to consider in phone cameras, such as sensor size, pixel size, lens quality, and aperture. But I don't want to confuse you, so I'm going to show you a simpler method. If you go to the site called DxOMark.com, there is a list of cameras of the phones compared. You can take advantage of this list to look at the smartphones with the best cameras. If you want to buy a phone with a good camera, I think you should look at many details such as aperture 1:1. Instead, try to pick a phone as high on this list as possible. That way you won't be fooled by small games like high megapixels. By the way, if you look at Marcus Brownlee's The Best Smartphone Camera video series, you will have a small idea. 3. Display. First of all, let's start with the type of panel. There are 3 types of panels that are most common on phone screens: IPS LCD, OLED, and AMOLED. Until 2022, many phone models had IPS LCD screens, but now almost all newly released phones use OLED and AMOLED screens. I will not confuse you by explaining these 3 panel types in detail one by one. I will just give a brief summary. The brightness and contrast values of OLED and AMOLED screens are much better than IPS LCD screens. It displays blacks, whites, and colors much better, so you'll be more satisfied with OLED and AMOLED displays when watching movies or videos. Also, IPS LCD screens have a problem we call IPS glow because of their structure. Because of the IPS glow, you may see bright, colorful lights in the corners of the phone. Areas on the screen that should be black are more of a white, light blue color. This is very uncomfortable when using the phone, especially in the dark. Therefore, if you want a good display, you should buy a phone with OLED and AMOLED screens. So what is the difference between these two? AMOLED technology emerged after OLED, and it is only a further development of OLED. While there isn't a huge difference between them, the color accuracy and refresh rates of AMOLED screens are slightly better. So if we need to make a comparison between three panels, AMOLED is better than OLED, and OLED is better than IPS LCD. Also, there is the refresh rate, that is Hertz values that I just mentioned. Hertz value on the phone screen shows how many times the screen is refreshed per second. For example, a phone with a 120 Hz screen can display 120 frames per second. As this Hertz value increases, the screen becomes more fluid. Especially when playing games, you can notice this much better. 4. Storage. I don't have much to tell you about it, but if you are undecided between storage options, I can recommend you to buy a phone with at least 128 GB of storage. In fact, I think 256 GB would be a much better choice if you don't want to deal with freeing up space in the phone memory in the future. I would also like to tell you this. If I had made this video a few years ago, I would have talked about whether there is support for external storage, but there is no need to talk about this for 2024, because almost none of the newly released phones have external storage support. Brands want you to pay more and buy phone models with higher storage. That's why you will not see external storage support in new phone models. 5. Battery. When you look at the phone battery specifications, you will see a value, the milliampere value. This value shows us the capacity of the battery in the phone. A higher milliampere rating usually means longer battery life. But this value alone doesn't mean much things. So what does it mean? For example, we have two different phone models with a 4000 milliampere battery. Normally, both of them should have the same battery performance, but their battery performance may be different because they both have different battery optimization, display, and other features. One may run out of charge more quickly than the other. I think you get this. Also, there are fast charging and wireless charging, but there's not much to tell about them. If you need it a lot, you can check if the phone you buy supports wireless charging. Almost all of the newly released phones have wireless charging and fast charging features. If you look at the technical specifications of the phone you want to buy, you can find out how quickly it charges to full with fast charging. Now let's move on to the most discussed topic. Should I buy an iPhone or an Android phone? There are many things to mention, but first of all, let's talk about the advantages of the iPhone over an Android phone. iPhones not give you a headache. In my opinion, the biggest advantage of the iPhone is that it does not give headaches. How so? Let me explain. When you want to buy a phone on a certain budget, you are much more likely to have any problems with the Android phone than on the iPhone. Examples are ghost screen problem in OLED and AMOLED screens, which we encountered a lot in the past. Because of this problem, traces of the image remained fixed on the screen for a certain period of time. And this problem was not present in a few phones, but in a serious number of Android phone models. Many other chronic problems can be given as examples, such as the problematic proximity sensor that we encounter more in Xiaomi, Poco, and Redmi models. Compared to these, it is true that iPhones also had chronic problems, but they were much easier to solve and did not affect the user experience too much. That's why, if you say I don't have budged problem, and I want to have a smoother phone experience, iPhone may be better choice for you. Apple ecosystem. Another advantage of the iPhone is it works flawlessly in the Apple ecosystem. This is probably one of the most cliché answers you'll ever hear, but if you already have Apple devices such as MacBooks and Apple Watches, it would be ridiculous to buy a phone other than an iPhone. Because Apple products work in incredible harmony with each other. For example, the AirDrop feature. With this feature, you can quickly transfer your documents, photos, videos, and more wirelessly from Apple device to another Apple device. Another example is the continuity camera feature. This feature allows you to use your iPhone as a webcam or scanner on your Mac computer. Of course, many other features such as handoff, sidecar, Apple Pay can be given as examples, but I will not explain them. In fact, most of these features are also available on Android phones, but unfortunately, they are not as fast, stable, and user-friendly as Apple devices. Briefly, if you have any Apple device in your hand and you think you will benefit from this ecosystem, this may be a good reason to buy an iPhone. Retaining the value of iPhones. Another advantage of the iPhone over Android is that it retains its value. You'll never see frequent or permanent price drops on your iPhone. After you buy an iPhone, if you decide to sell it, you can resell it at a good price without incurring too much loss, because iPhones retain their value very well. At the same time, it probably takes much less time to sell your iPhone than an Android phone, because the demand for iPhones is much higher. By the way, let me say this. There is a general thought that iPhones are more expensive than Androids. This is not always the case, and in my opinion, it is not the case for 2024 at all. Now, iPhone prices are not as expensive as they used to be compared to the same segment Android phones. For example, on the Android side, the S23 Ultra with 256GB of storage, which is a high-end phone, and the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which also has 256GB of storage, have the same price. Therefore, it would not be right to say iPhone is more expensive than Android for 2024. Instagram's privilege to iPhones. You may have heard this in many places. So, is Instagram privileges to iPhone devices true? For example, when we want to upload the same photo taken by Android and iPhone to Instagram, does the quality of the photo shared from Android decrease more? Does Instagram privilege iPhones? Actually, I'm not going to lie. I don't know the exact answer. When I looked at other people's tests on this topic, I saw that there was no difference in photo sharing. In other words, the photo taken from both devices has very good quality on Instagram. However, when we move on to the video quality, I am not sure, but I guess the video uploaded by the iPhone has better quality. But like I said, I'm not sure, and these tests don't belong to me. If I get the flagship phones of both parties, I plan to make a special video. But apart from what I mentioned, the iPhone does not have a big advantage over an Android phone. Keep that in mind as well. To be honest, the iPhone is mostly praised for its fan club. This audience generally consists of people who do not care about the technical side of the phone in any way just because of the brand name, and think that the iPhone is much better than all other phones. Of course, this is not valid for all iPhone users, but you should know that there is such a situation. Now let's move on to the advantages of Android. Variety and price. I think the biggest advantage of Android is its variety. It is much easier to find a model according to the needs on Android phones with hundreds of models compared to iPhone models with a limited number of colors, price options, and models. On the Android side, we have much more price options as well as much more technical features. So if you are looking for a more budget model, Android phones may be a better choice. Camera. It is known that iPhone's cameras are much better than Android phones, but this is just a nonsense. In fact, the situation is exactly the opposite. Especially Google's Pixel phones can take incredible photos. If you look at the phone camera comparisons on YouTube, you will have a better command of the subject. More freedom, control, and customization. This is probably one of the most cliché advantages you've heard before, but Android is an open-source platform, and it offers more freedom and customization options than iOS. You can customize almost everything on your Android device, from the look of your home screen to how you interact with your phone. Of course, you will decide if this is really enough reason to buy an Android device. Apple's impositions. This is one of the reasons why I move away from the iPhone and use an Android phone. It may seem ridiculous when you hear it, but after listening to me, you will agree with me. If you are going to buy an iPhone, Apple forces you to buy Pro and Pro Max models. So if you remember with the iPhone 15, Apple switched to the USB-C port. But there is a point that everyone miss out. If you buy an iPhone 15 or 15 Plus, you will be able to transfer at USB 2.0 speed using the USB-C connection. USB 2.0 is a 24-year-old technology, and the transfer speed is incredibly slow. In other words, this transfer speed is absolutely unacceptable for 2024, but Apple does not agree with us. Not only these, but many more features, such as the screen difference between the iPhone 11 and 11 Pro Max, force us to buy the Pro and Pro Max models of the iPhone, and that gets on my nerves. This is not a reason to buy an Android, but it can be shown as a reason to move away from the iPhone. Minor advantages. In contrast to the crappy iOS file manager, it is much easier to organize the files on Android with the file manager. On the other hand, the notifications section on iOS is terrible. Android has a much more organized and grouped notification area. Also, there are many other minor problems such as links not opening in their respective apps on iOS. These are seen as unnecessary small details, but they greatly affect the user experience. Of course, more can be said about the advantages and disadvantages, but since this is not our main topic, I have to keep this topic short. Now let's end up the video. Let me remind you again that if you are wondering about the phone models I recommend, I will add the links of the best phone models in every budget to the description part and comments. Don't forget to look at the links. If you have video suggestions, you can write them in the comments. If you enjoyed, please like the video. But if you didn't, you can click on the dislike button. See you in the next videos. Take care and bye.